of the word is lacking. And when Mary receives the word, all these things are going to be done to you, the seemingly impossible, the irrational, the ridiculous, the absurd. Her response is, let it be done to me according to your word. No, like, hey, can we discuss this? Can I have some additional information, please? No, she just believes. Let it be done to me according to you.
So she wasn't blaming somebody else either.
Yeah, she wasn't throwing anybody under the bus. She was willing to even suffer the indignity of that. Because think about it.
In that culture, yeah.
Yeah, nowadays
she could have been stoned to death.
Right? Nowadays, you put it up on Facebook. We don't have a shame culture anymore. In those days, it says that Joseph was a righteous man because he desired to put her away quietly. Yeah. Right. Whereas most people would have made a public display. They would have waited till she gave birth, and then they would have dragged her out in the street and they would have stoned her to death. Right. So she was willing to suffer even in her flesh in order to bring forth the promise. So she's the better Eve. In the fullness of time, God brings forth his son, born of the virgin, born under the law, to redeem those who are under the law. Right? The Gospels say. All right. All right. So the double fulfillment here is that there will be seeds, sons, plural, and from these sons come many other sons, as we're going to find out here in a moment. But ultimately, from one line, just as through Noah, right? And one of his three sons, right? Remember what his name was? Anybody? Shem, very good. From Shem comes the subsequent generations till you get to Abraham, right? So, and then from Abraham to Isaac, then Jacob, etc., 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 right? All right, so that's the double fulfillment. There will be sons, plural. There will be seeds, but it's the one that takes precedent. So that the goy, even the nations, would be saved. Is that heat getting a bit much? You guys too hot?
Yeah.
Are you too hot? Maybe it's all of our layers here.
Yeah. I don't want to take off.
All right, so any questions so far? We're doing good? All right, so let's go ahead and someone read 8 through 14. 8 through 14, chapter 17.
And I will give to you and to your offsprings after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of the Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offsprings after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offsprings after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 years old among you shall be circumcised. Every male throughout your generations, whether born in your house or bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring, both he who is born in your house and he who was bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant.
Ouch, cut off. Double cutting off. So,
and it wasn't even his fault, because the parents at day 8 didn't
follow the command, right?
But it's he that will be
the one not keeping the covenant. Yeah. So interestingly, there. We'll get it. Well, I don't want to forget either. So, if you're 8 days old, are you making a conscious choice to be a part of the covenant? No. We would all agree the answer to that is no. Speaking of suffering, right? So it's being done to you. Here, Luther makes the argument in regards to infant baptism, and rightly so. Baptism, your circumcision, you are purely passive. The action was you were being acted upon. What is infant baptism? You're being acted upon, right? That's why we disagree with our Trinitarian brothers and sisters who believe in free will theology in regards to salvation. That, as Kenny likes to point out from the third article of the Apostles' Creed in the explanation section by Luther. I cannot by my own strength, right? Believe in Jesus or call upon him, right? Remember the action, we're studying this in John, which is so beautiful in John on Sunday mornings for adult Bible study, is the action is always not earth to heaven, but heaven above to earth below. It's always the action. He even flat out says to the holy apostles, you didn't choose me, I chose you. And he says it over and over and over again, right? So when you're an infant on the 8th day, the seeds, speaking of which, the sons, right, of the covenant, starting with Isaac here, right? On the 8th day, you are purely passive. You are pee-pee. Purely passive, being acted upon, right? Because no 8-day-old infant male is going to choose circumcision by his own reason or strength.
No,
right?
not the way they scream.
No, it's not going to happen, right? When given the choice, the answer will be no, right? No, it is done to you, right? Such it is under Christ and holy baptism, right? So here we have the better Isaac, our Lord, right? And we have baptism. Not done with human hands, as it says in Colossians, right? Which we'll get to here in a moment. All right, so now notice here there's a promise of land, right? Speaking of Canaan, right? Now, again, think of the mountains and immediate fulfillments and ultimate fulfillments of prophecy, right? So let's just divide these camps here. Because one is of Sinai and one is from the Jerusalem from above. I should have made more room. Right? And that Canaan, the land of your sojourning, right? Look as far as you can from the east to the west. I think a few weeks ago in this class, I passed out an actual physical map. It's like a giant triangle, right? Starting from the river to the river. And if you go to Israel today, and if any of those folks over there dressed all in black with curls are willing to speak to you as a goyim, they will tell you that they are interested in one thing, from the river to the river, thus fulfilling Genesis chapter 15. And why do they keep talking about from the river to the river? Well, literally, they want to get rid of everyone that is on their land. Get off my land, as Clint Eastwood famously said in one of his near recent movies, right? I love that line. Get off my lawn. Right? So basically, they want everyone from the Nile, which would be the east side of the Nile. Yeah, from the east side of the Nile all the way over to the west side of the Tigris and the Euphrates and everything in between to get off my lawn, right? Get out, right? They want all of Canaan, and they want to fulfill Genesis 15, right? By any means necessary. That's exactly what's going on there today. Don't let anybody tell you anything otherwise. That's exactly what's going on here. Because when you look at the actual leaked documents, or even what they're saying to one another in Hebrew, not what they're saying at the press conferences in English, they're talking this language right here.
There's undertones of other things.
Yeah, I mean they're calling the Goyim Palestinians, they're calling them Amalekites, and
Literally.
yes, yeah, like Benjamin Netanyahu is literally calling them Amalekites. Well, what was supposed to happen to the Amalekites? Yeah, they're supposed to get off my lawn, whether it's dead or alive. Get off my lawn, you know. So that's what this is all about. Even now, even today, is they believe that if they just get the land back, rebuild the temple, right? And there's dispensational Christians, we've talked about that, trying to help them do all this stuff. And then our argument from an amillennial perspective is that that's not going to bring back the Christ, right? It's going to bring the Antichrist. That's what it's going to do. It's going to set up a worldwide false religion,
When did
etc.
things go south for Israel?
70 AD.
Well, I mean, there's many times where it's gone south because just as those
I mean, you think the way the land was where Jesus was there, why did everybody just become disorganized?
I mean, you could say it was going south even in the wilderness after they left Egypt in
Okay.
the Exodus. I mean, because they're constantly rebelling. Only 2 men of that entire generation were allowed to enter into the promised land, a tiny remnant, a fraction, right?
Wow.
And then they get in, and then they what? They don't do what they're supposed to do, and then it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And every time they're not fulfilling His word, you have generations that are under attack from their neighbors, the Canaanites, you name it, and
Being disciplined.
right, and they're being disciplined. There's multiple diasporas where they're kicked out of the land, whether it's by the hand of the Assyrians, I should say, or by the hand of the Babylonians, or by the hand of the Greeks, and then by the hand of the Romans, and then you have that long diaspora where the majority of Jews are away, and now they're trying to get back in. But they're trying to have a priesthood, a temple, a religion, a covenant, apart from who?
Yeah.
God who?
Christ.
Jesus, the second person of the Trinity specifically, right?
Yeah,
The
'cause
Yahweh.
Because they don't believe the Messiah is.
Right, they actually deny, they say Jesus is in hell boiling in a pot of excrement. That is,
What?
yes, that is the writings of the rabbis from the medieval period, right? Mary was a prostitute.
Yeah.
Mary, Jesus is the illegitimate child of a Roman centurion.
Right.
They reject the seed utterly.
No wonder
So-
they have problems.
Yeah, so there's no having this religion and this covenant. It's over. The temple was destroyed. The judgment was they rejected the Son, but thanks be to God. Now remember, there's going to be as the birth pains increase. We already have a trickle of Jews who are becoming Messianic Jews who are repenting and believing that and confessing with their mouths and their lips, they're being baptized, that Jesus is indeed Messiah, right? And that will actually increase. And there will be a time, the scriptures are quite clear on this, when the age of the Gentiles is closed. And then He will turn His heart back to the Jews. And at the very last moment, a bunch are going to be brought in. A bunch. There'll be mass, and this is literally right as the Antichrist is coming, right? There will be a mass conversion of Jews, realizing we've brought forth Antichrist. We need to go back to the Christ, the Messiah.
Well, you have to understand too. I mean, here as Gentiles, and we believe Christ is the Messiah. Christ is our Savior.
Yes.
They're still working out of the Old Testament. They don't have a gospel like we
Right.
have because they don't believe the Messiah was here yet.
No.
Yes.
So any of this that we study in the New Testament is non-existent to them.
Well, again, this is not a rational discussion of looking at the Bible and figuring out who the Messiah is. They are exactly like Saint Saul of Tarsus
Before
in the
he-
book of Acts, chapter 9. They're on the road to Damascus with letters to put the Christians in prison, right? And they are blinded, right? And there has to be a divine intervention, and they have to be baptized, and the scales have to fall from their eyes, right?
And that was right after he held the cloaks for the stoning of Thomas.
Right.
Stephen, yeah,
Or
Stephen,
Stephen, I
yes,
meant. Yeah,
absolutely,
Stephen,
right.
yeah.
He held. I often think about what is
He
the thorn in the
instigated
flesh, and I wonder if that's
That
the
is
thorn
it.
in the flesh that he keeps having a reoccurring vision of the horror
What he did.
of what he held he watched the cloaks as Stephen is being bludgeoned
Well,
to death,
and we
right?
watched as Stephen professed and said, I see Jesus standing at
Yes.
the right hand of God.
Yeah,
So maybe, that thorn.
the
goes
horror that
deep.
might be the thorn in the flesh.
That goes deep.
Is a reminder that he is like Cain.
Yeah.
Stephen is like Abel being slain for the testimony of a
Christ.
better offering, a better belief, a better religion of Yahweh, and he stood by and watched his fellow countrymen slay
Well,
the
and
true
that's like
believer.
even who he goes to get the prophet or whatever, where he was told to wash it. He's like, do you know who this guy is?
Ananias.
Yeah,
Ananias.
Ananias,
Are you
that's
sure
right.
you want to save this
Yeah,
guy?
yeah.
I would have probably been asked, are you doubly sure? Can I get it in writing, please? Because this seems like this is going to go a bad direction.
Can you wait till I'm 25 miles down the street?
Yeah.
You know, he let him have that question.
Yeah.
You know, he
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, to Paul's credit, though, speaking of renaming from Saul to Paul, to his credit, though, he then, most people don't realize that, but there's actually a 14-year period where he, you know, we were talking about the Hebrew scriptures. He actually goes to Arabia and is in fasting and prayer for a 14-year period so that he can understand the Old Testament before he ever goes on his first missionary journey so by the time he's ready to go on his first missionary journey to the Gentiles, right, he is fully versed on the Christology of the Old Testament. Now suddenly the scales are completely fallen from his eyes. He can look all the way back into Genesis and see the stuff very clearly. And that's why his theology is just so amazing, because he literally takes, I mean, that's a lot of discipline, 14 years of study, right?
He's my
So
favorite guy.
so he's fully prepared to not only preach in the synagogues, because he always goes to the synagogue, he gives the Jews a chance every single time, and then of course the vast majority of times, except for a few exceptions, he's cast out, he's persecuted, he's hunted, and if you want to read the litany of things that happened to him in his own flesh, which is a just punishment for his earlier unbelief and his earlier actions, read 2 Corinthians. It goes on and on and on about everything that he went through. But I think when you catch a vision of the risen Lord, Saul, Saul, why
All
are
that
you
just kinda
persecuting
goes
me? You're just like, I think I'm willing to do whatever it takes to suffer for the testimony, right? All right. So, is everybody doing okay? Last couple minutes?
I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
Says, who is bought, both he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
that like a slave?
Yeah, we talked earlier about indentured
I
servitude
I
and
questioned that too. I was going to
Yeah.
ask. Thank you.
yes, yeah. So earlier, when we talk about slavery here, the slavery in Abraham's household was for a certain period of time, and then if you wanted to stay, then there was a process by which you could stay. And how do we know that the slavery was completely different? Well, Eleazar of Damascus is the prime example. And that, I'm not saying that everything was perfect and they were all singing Kumbaya around the campfire. I'm not saying that. But they were all, as with any family, an extended family, there can be complications, right? I don't know about your family, but my family, love you all, is not totally perfect. Neither am I. And so there is oftentimes tensions. You see the tension between Hagar and Sarai. Of course, there's going to be tensions further on, even between Jacob and Esau. So yes, there's always tensions. But however, even Eleazar of Damascus could inherit the household, which is a completely different kind of servitude than the kind of servitude you see
So did they
in the rest
check
of
these
humanity.
people?
Check them, like do a background check, you know?
No. I mean, I'm talking about those that were circumcised. It sounded like if they didn't, they were cut off from the people.
Yes.
So how were they?
So going forward, all males, right? If you're going to be a part of Abraham's crew,
This is the mark.
this is the mark in the flesh.
So they were literally looking for that.
Didn't the priest do the circumcisions?
Yes, later
So
on.
there was a way it was
Yeah.
documented. Then.
Yeah, because remember,
okay.
the Mosaic Law has not yet come. This is
Right.
all a precursor showing you some of the direction of the... And you even see that in Genesis chapter 15 with the type of animals that are chosen for the sacrifice when the torch and the smoking pot pass through the pieces, right?
Okay.
Even the two turtle doves, right? Which ironically are the exact animals offered for sacrifice and whole burnt offerings on behalf of Mary and Jesus at his after his time of purification and presentation, which is another feast day in the church year, is that the poorest of the poor even have an opportunity to offer obedience unto the law under Moses, right? So, where is that bug coming from?
Yeah, try it again. Rob.
I set you free. All right. You are free. All right. So,
That wasn't an earth tremor.
If the pastor says you will be free, you will be free indeed.
if the pastor sets you free, you will be free indeed. All right. So, let's see here. So now notice here that there's a conditional now. We already have, whenever I always teach the Sunday school kids this, and not the catechism kids this, is the law is never good news, because the law is always conditional, right? So they have to, the seeds, the sons have to keep the covenant, and if you don't keep the covenant of circumcision, you will be cut off. Later, that also applies to the entire Mosaic law. If you do not keep it, there's going to be contractual obligations, which includes the purging of your flesh and the punishment of your nation, right? And that's why you see the punishments over and over and over again, because they even go to extremes of whether it's a golden calf, bowing down and worshiping, or setting up Asherah poles, worshiping the Baals, false idolatry. And of course, that type of idolatry is equated to spiritual adultery, right? Because the bridegroom's supposed to have a faithful bride, right? And so whenever there's spiritual idolatry, you're bowing down to creatures and things that are made with human hands rather than the immortal God, you are committing spiritual adultery. And of course the punishment for that is death, right? You're cut off. So, there's an immediate fulfillment. Yes, you're going to get the land of the sojournings, but only conditional conditions. Only if you keep the covenant, beginning with circumcision, right? And all the other, in the Mosaic laws, there's going to be more Moses coming up, right? And it's going to get layered on. Like, okay, you want to be perfect? You want to save yourself by means of the law?
Good luck.
Behold Numbers and Deuteronomy. Behold Leviticus, right? And it's so unbelievably complex and arduous that they're never able to save themselves by their own means, by their own reason, by their own strength, right? Rather, there's going to be an ultimate fulfillment that comes out of baptism. The circumcision of the Spirit, not made with human hands, right? You can read Colossians chapter 2, I think is one of the places that shows up, which is ultimately a better Canaan. New heavens, new earth, new Jerusalem, new flesh, right? Which is the Son setting you free, not Pastor Juan setting you free. The Son sets you free, you will be free indeed, right? All right, so the gospel promises new heavens, new earth, new Jerusalem, but only the one who's believing in the word of El Shaddai, of Abraham, building their faith, building all their hope, and putting all their trust in the seed. Not the seeds, and hoping that, the Jews can get their stuff together and then they can give us a plan of salvation. No, we look to this Jew, right? We look to Jesus of Nazareth, the seed, right? And he's the one that will give us all these things. That bug made, well, that's his buddy, because there's another one.
There is.
Oh, that's his man.
It is November. Why are there still bugs around? This is not, all right.
Coming in where it's warm.
All right.
Talked about that Sunday when they come back. And the dead are-
Maybe that's the Lord said arise, right? All right, so I think we'll stop there, and then next week, save your page. We'll pick up on page 3, beginning with verse 15. And Kenny, you can hit that
Can I ask a question
button for
first
me.
before
Thank you,
you-
bye-bye. Okay, go,
The
yes.
last part you said, the one believing in El Shaddai of Abraham shall be built into the Zerah.
Yeah, because remember that earlier passage from Ephesians chapter 2 with Christ as the cornerstone,
Oh, okay.
and we are built into his holy temple. So by faith, we Gentiles who have hearts of stone are converted into hearts of flesh and part of the living temple, even his own body. Remember the earlier passage from Hebrews chapter 10 this week in the pericope readings, that we pass through the curtain, which is his flesh, right? Into the most holy places. We boldly enter in. I preached about that on Wednesday night. So yeah, we are literally being built into the seed who is the promise, right? We are his people, his temple, his bride, right? And the two become one flesh, right? Because, speaking of which, people often, yes, there is such a thing as female circumcision, and that is a terrible process which God does not condone.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that, a lady that's been talking about that. She said she was mutilated.
It's
And
actually practiced in Africa.
Yeah, and she
No.
said she was
Yeah,
mutilated.
it's horrific, right? And God does not condone or sanction it. Now, I've often had the question though, why is it only males that are circumcised, Well, because remember, this all goes back to the Garden of Eden, the two are one flesh, and when the one is circumcised, both are holy, right? The two become one. Remember, Eve comes out of Adam, they rejoin, and from them comes the third strand in Ecclesiastes. The cord of three strands is not easily torn apart. Yes, because you can have the believing Adam and the believing Eve, but you need the believing seed, which is their son, woven in as the third strand, right? Yep. It's a great wedding passage that's often used. Oh, you did start that back up again?
I never stopped.
Oh, okay.